So what is this process of how do we create these possibilities? Well, quite often we are asked, how many possibilities should we actually create? And one thing we certainly insist on is more than one. So usually we think about maybe 3 to 5 because we want to have enough variety among our possibilities. At the same time, we want to study each of them in quite some depth, so we don't want to have too many of them. Who do we want to involve? Well, we certainly want to involve a diverse set of people because at this point, what we're really trying to get at is a diverse set of ideas. So diverse set of people in terms of background and functional experience. Involving people who have not created the existing strategy is very helpful. Involving people who will later be charged to actually implement the strategy will be very helpful, because if we just keep strategic planning from execution separated, quite often we'll not execute what we actually had planned. What is also helpful, and I'll come back to this again and again, is that we include our existing strategy or our status quo choices and treat it as if it is a new idea. So that sometimes actually will generate some interesting new insights. Now, what is really important at this point in the process, that the group really commits itself to separate idea generation from idea evaluation. This is not the time yet to shoot down ideas. The problem is the following. We are actually pretty good in finding problems in new ideas, particularly new ideas that look quite radically different from what we're currently doing. And frankly, probably most of those ideas are bad ideas that should be shot down, but not right now. Because if we shoot down all novel ideas right now, where do we end up with? We'll end up again with just small incremental ideas that we all feel very comfortable with. The whole idea about this process is that we need to give these crazy ideas a little bit more breathing room. If you remember back to this picture of the big peak, that looked rather frightening. So it's not quite completely clear that we really want to move up that mountain, but at least we want to have considered it. So really be careful at this point, particularly if you're the most senior person in the room. Because if the most senior person in the room at this point goes, oh, that's a bad idea, everyone will go back to the old way of operating and saying, okay, fine, tell me what you want to know, tell me what you want to do, and I'll find data to support you, right? That's not where we want to end up. So what we really want to have at this point is a free flow of ideas. Now, you might be tempted to say, okay, if we want to get a big set of ideas out of a group, let's sit around a table and do some brainstorming. Actually, there's quite a lot of research done on that topic that finds that that is actually not the best way to get the most diverse set of ideas out of a group. Actually, it turns out if you have people first work by themselves, you'll get at the end a much broader set of ideas than if you immediately start doing some joint brainstorming. Why is that? Well, if you do a joint brainstorming, the first 1 or 2 ideas, they may be kind of intriguing, and then everyone kind of globs onto them, but we don't hear about all the other ideas that people might have had, which may be even more interesting. So setting some time aside, maybe even do it as a pre-work requirement before you get to the meeting, or setting some time aside inside that meeting will be quite helpful for you to generate a broader set of ideas. Now, if the group is large, and group size very much depends on sort of the organizational culture. In some organizations, we need to involve lots of people. In other organizations, we can have smaller teams. But if we have a large group, it may make sense to actually start out by separating that group into smaller subgroups, have maybe them compete against each other who can come up with the most interesting ideas before we get the group together as a whole. Lastly, there is the question of, when and how do we do this? Should we take our group off-site and do it sort of in a one-day off-site event, or should we sort of spread this over time? I don't think there is the right answer. Of course, going off-site sometimes is nice because it sort of increases our creative juices being outside our normal environment. But it has the bad effect of saying, oh, today is September 12th, today is the day to be very creative. Now, sometimes it's really hard, right, to turn on creativity on a dime. So sometimes it's better to spread out this process over several days so you can reflect on what you've heard, build on it. So both of those approaches work. They have, trade-offs involved. So there are lots of tools that allow us to generate new ideas. Here are sort of 3 questions that I find quite helpful. The first type of question is an inside-out question that asks, what are we really good at? What are our core capabilities? What are some things that we are really world-class in and that we can really build on? Then there are outside-in questions that scan a bit more the environment and ask what are maybe some underserved needs out there in the market? What do current competitors not address? So that's a more outside-in view. And then the third type of question that sometimes actually creates maybe the most novel ideas is what you might call a far outside-in approach, which usually employs some kind of analogical reasoning. So you might ask yourself, what would it be like to be the Amazon of our industry or the Walmart of our industry? Right? That sometimes spurs some interesting ideas that are quite radically different from what we're currently doing.